So good to see that so many of you decided to stay here. It must have been the exercise, right? Right. I'm looking for the green light from the back. We're good to go again. I think I'm getting the hang of the scheduling, which is a great life skill to have, actually. One of the things that we found really important for this conference is that it's not just practitioners, it's not just sales pitches, it's not just technology, but it should also be about research, because research is what drives innovation, right? And it's also what drives human-centered innovation. It's what really drives us forward. And we've got a wonderful research tradition in Europe. So that's why I'm really proud to introduce this panel to you. We've got Kulvinder, Angus, Lotte, and my dear friend Michael, and we're actually going to probably just continue the lovely talk that we had yesterday about the future of conversational AI. Kulvinder, you're going to moderate, right? If there's anything I can do to kind of assist, just let me know. But the floor is yours.
Oh, thank you. Welcome, everyone. Can you hear me clearly? Yeah? Great. Okay, so our talk, the next wave of conversational AI. What does it look like? What challenges Loom? I think what we'll do is, first of all, before we get really into this area, I'm just going to introduce ourselves first of all. So I'm Dr. Kulvinder Panesar. I'm an assistant professor in applied AI. I'm a computer scientist, computational linguist, and NLP expert. And my research area is looking at the hybridization of NLP with lean machine learning. Yeah, this is taking those large language models. And I'm really, really passionate about looking at the early detection of cognitive decline, and a very sensitive area, but an area that's really, really needed. So over to you, Angus.
Hello, I'm Angus. I'm a research associate at Heriot-Watt University in Edinburgh. I also am very interested in voice assistant accessibility. So, for example, as dementia progresses, speech changes, and instead of getting users to adapt to these systems, how do we adapt the systems to the users? So, I think that's kind of work.
Hi, my name is Lotte Willemsen. I'm a professor in applied sciences at Rotterdam University of Applied Sciences. I'm leading a research group doing research at the intersection of communication, technology, and psychology, and I am sort of obsessed over the question, what makes someone or something really human in our perception? So I've been studying these questions in relation to conversational AI, and more lately in relation to digital humans. And for those who have missed Guido's talk 2 sessions ago, digital humans are basically digital agents designed to be very human-like, not only in terms of interaction capabilities, but also in terms of appearance. So, more simply said, embodied conversational agents.
Hello, I'm Michael McTeer. I'm an emeritus professor from Ulster University, Northern Ireland. That means that I'm retired but haven't gone away. I'm involved in quite a lot of research projects still. I've been involved really in dialogue systems, as we call them, for a long time. I wrote a book in 1987, before some of you were born maybe, called The Articulate Computer. And it's interesting to see how things have moved on since then. So the sort of projects I'm involved in, I'll be talking tomorrow about one of them, is to do with socially relevant conversational AI. So in areas like healthcare, the one tomorrow is about mental health support, and then also relevant to myself as well, home monitoring of people who are getting older to support active and healthy aging. So certainly what's been happening in conversational AI is really dramatic, and it's a great honor to be involved in this panel.
Okay, thank you all. So, okay, let's put a bit of a context to our talk, because we've heard a lot about the technologies, we've heard a lot about what the users want. Let's just set the scene to where we are at the moment. So I'm just going to put a few quotes out there. You're familiar with them. We've just had a talk from Amazon, so great, we're following up with them. So Jeff Bezos has quoted the beginning of the golden age of AI. Another realm that I want to sort of like put you into is the fact that chatbots, okay, they'll be our best friends. And the other side of it is the fantasy of communicating with non-living humans is here to stay. Now, there's another research panel going on at the moment, which is to do with the future of conversational experiences. We're going to have a lot of overlap between the two, and that's going to be technology and users. But what we want to try and do is look at where we are at the moment and what will that future look like. So at the moment, we have this maturity of strategy, maturity of technology as well. So nothing's like an innovative project in our space now. And the other thing is that we've all heard about a lot of automated assistants. You know, Gartner predicts this, you know, there'll be a 10th of automated agent interactions by 2026, just to put some things into context. Then we've got our users, then we've got our generation X, Y, Z, alpha, beta, you know, your alpha and digital native, you've got your beta, which, you know, they've just grown up with AI as well. So what's the future going to hold for us? Well, let's put it into 20, we sort of gave ourselves a little bit of a window. So we thought about probably the next 30 years, 20, 30 years, what will that look like? So, so that's where I really want to start. We've already heard from some of the speakers about multimodal strategies, multi-channel, personalization. We've heard that multilingual, all these expectations that we want to see. But what we want to do is we want to take that a little bit further now. So I'm going to sort of head from a technology sort of focus with introducing our future now. What will that look like in 20 to 30 years' time? So Michael, if you could give us a little bit of a flavor of what that would look like when it comes to taking on from what we've heard about ChatGPT today, the large language models, ChatGPT out today. Where do you think that's going to head, and what can we do with that? And where do you see the technology, the pitfalls possibly, but obviously the opportunities first?
Yeah, thank you. We've had a lot of very interesting talks already on these topics. The very first one by Core I found particularly interesting, and there was the simple message that a chatbot has really two aspects. One is understanding the input, and then the second is generating the response. And it's that second part that's really the most difficult to tackle. Generally, it is so far been pretty much handcrafted, and now we have this possibility of generating responses on the fly. But it's interesting that at the moment there are a lot of warnings about hallucination, offensive responses, and so on, and all the sort of difficulties that might come up. In fact, in a recent webinar, Alan Nicol from RASA, we work with RASA quite a lot, said that it would be very foolhardy to introduce large language models directly into conversational agents. Right now there are lots of hazards and so on, and certainly for a business case that wouldn't really work. So regarding what it might be like in 30 years' time, I'm not even sure what it'll be like tomorrow, because every day there's something new. We've just had GPT-4 launched on us, and a large document of about 90 pages if you want to find out more. I find it very difficult to keep up, even though I'm retired and don't actually have to do other work. But I think the sort of trends that we're going to see are, well, first of all, better ways of generating the responses to generate safe and useful responses. So there's going to have to ways to do that. And I think it's going to involve, to some extent, elements of what we used to call, or what still might be called, good old-fashioned AI, symbolic AI. Right away back in my early days, there was a lot of work on how systems could recognize the intentions of a user when they were asking, for example, when's the next bus to San Francisco? And the system realizes they want to get there, obviously, but there isn't another bus. The last one is already gone, but there might be one that goes through some other destination, and it will then try to find a helpful response. Now, you can't really do that with a large language model, to my mind. You have to do a little bit more. You have to be able to recognize what the person really wants beneath the surface of what they've actually said. So if there's going to be some way, and there are some people actually, I think, at OpenStream working on that, people like Phil Cohen, who've been around for a long time, that's going to be a very important thing, that we go beneath the surface of the actual input and try and work out the intentions behind the user's input in order to be able to detect what they say. So that's one aspect. I'll not talk about too many others because the others want to have a turn as well. But I think what we heard about digital humans was very interesting as well. So combining that with multimodal systems is going to be another very important thing, because now we have devices that are capable of doing that, our phones, our smart speakers, and so on. So I'll hand over to the other panelist.
Yep, so Lottie, could you sort of look at the concept of humanizing technology and explore that a little bit for us, please?
Yeah, of course. So you ask, what is the future going to look like?
Yes.
I would say it's going to be to look very human-like. We see digital humans popping up everywhere, in customer care, in sales, in all kinds of domains, healthcare, education, banking, all are starting to use digital humans. And this is because they come with great promise, right? Because they have the promise to really, quite literally, put a human face onto AI. And consumers feel that they need this because as we get more involved with digital communication, we feel that we are getting into more distance with real human beings. So the past few years I've been studying why we are increasingly humanizing the world around us. This is called anthropomorphism. We attribute all kinds of human attributes to all kinds of non-living things. But now we see this rise of digital humans. So I wanted to explore how come. And we can explain this because of two human motivations. And the first one is sociality motivation. We really have this deep desire to connect with other people. But of course, other people are not always available to us. This is also pushed because of digital communication. So we're looking through our human lenses to humanize the world around us. And the second motivation is affectance motivation. We really want to hold a grip and to control the complex world around us. And with all kinds of new technologies coming in, we feel that we're losing grip. So humanizing the world around us, humanizing technology, makes us feel that we're in control again. So digital humans step into these two motivations. So that's why we're seeing popping them up in all kinds of domains. A challenge here is that if we really want to seize the power of digital humans, we need a holistic perspective. Developers of digital humans are really focused on making digital humans appear really human-like. And that makes sense, right? Because this is what sets them apart from chatbots. They add this extra visual layer, a layer that adds trust and rapport to conversational agents. But while this is happening, what I observe is that that is something I call a human design gap. There is so much effort put into making digital humans look as most human-like that we forget about all the other things that are making conversational agents very human-like. For example, an awesome conversational design. So what I really hope for the future is that we're going to close that gap. And what we need is really an interdisciplinary, holistic perspective. And what I expect for the future is scientists, but also practitioners to collaborate from all kinds of disciplines to really force ourselves to make the future as human-like and humane as possible. Yeah.
Thank you. Just a point on that. Digital doubles. Where can we see them? Give me some examples of them, because I think that sounds like the effectiveness is going to go way over the scale. So can you give us some examples?
Yeah, so that is the second answer to your question. What is the future going to look like? It's going to be human-like, but also more like us.
Yeah.
So one application of digital humans is not to create a digital entity that is of someone that doesn't exist, but to make a digital human out of someone that really exists or has existed in the past, but has deceased. So this is what we call digital doubles, or replica, if you'd like. And these are taking off quite rapidly as well. The most well-known example is Synthesia, where you can make a replica of yourself. And that enables you to do all kinds of tasks on your behalf. So if I would make use of Synthesia, I could make a replica of myself that is able to represent myself and to talk and have presentations at multiple places at the same time. So while sitting here, I could have Synthesia have another lecture, for example, at the university where I work for. So we're seeing digital doubles popping up everywhere. Another example is, for example, digital celebrities, like you can make a replica of James Dean or Marilyn Monroe, and to to use it in storytelling and to use it in the creative industries, for example. I've also seen examples of digital doubles that, models that are currently working. They are now investing in making a digital double of themselves. So if they are becoming a bit old and not able to model again, they can use their digital double to also work in the future. So this is quite a sci-fi, but it is already happening right now.
So that humanizing technology has got such a spectrum in itself. Angus, I want to focus now on dialogue. How do we deal with, there's so much into dialogue design, but what about the naturalness of dialogue? How do we instill sort of verification, sort of repair strategies as part of that dialogue design? So from a very sort of conversational design, sort of technical sort of slant, how do you think that's going to work?
So I guess I see in the next 20 to 30 years similar, sort of more human-like agents, because, I don't know, typically I think it's fair to say that all of the examples that I've seen today in research and in business are, one user taking turns with a system, and, despite the sort of the target user groups that I tend to work with, it's just not a natural way that we interact. So if I say, yesterday I ate crackers with, I don't need to finish my sentence, I could say with Michael, with chopsticks, with grapes. It doesn't matter how I finish the sentence, you still understood what I'd said. You don't need to wait for me to finish the sentence. So one project I worked on, for example, is trying to understand what was said, what is missing, and then trying to repair, getting the completion of the sentence, in this case it was questions, in order to answer the question. Instead of just being, I don't understand, and then the user having to repeat the entire question again, which again is useful for us all, but particularly people who may forget words more often, such as people with dementia. And the other sort of thing is this one user with one agent sort of situation, which is very common in business. But we see applications, sort of a robot travel agent, for example. I was at a conference a few weeks ago where they had this, and again, it was one person coming in and sitting down with a travel agent, and I don't know, I've actually only used a travel agent like one time, but I imagine people tend to go with couples or with friends, and I'm working currently with a robot. Are you okay?
Sorry.
No, just checking you're all right. A robot in a hospital waiting room, and it's in a memory clinic. And patients typically come in with a companion. So instead of it just being one user, the patient may ask a question, the companion will then answer that question, ask their own question. They might say we, signifying it's a shared goal that they both have. And that's important if you go to a coffee shop and you're two separate people, or you're two people together, the person would treat you differently. These are the sort of types of things that I think sort of, currently these systems can't have natural interactions with more than one person, or where you're sort of repairing mid-sentence incrementally.
Okay, so if we extend that a little bit further to the wider sort of ecosystem, the platforms that we're working on, how are we going to deal with what will be the sort of the multi-party sort of presence? What's that going to look like?
So I can give the example. So the project I'm working on is an EU project. It's called the Spring Project, and we have, I think, 7 universities, and we're Heriot is the conversational AI one. So some of them are working on navigation and stuff like that. But it's one robot in the hospital, and it's just sort of being able to use computer vision to detect that there's multiple people. Also, you have to not just listen to what was said, but who said it. It's very important. I think we have like 20 students at the moment working on multi-party quizzes. And if you imagine if someone said, I think it's London, and the second utterance was, yes, it's London. If that's the same person, it's just them affirming how sure they are of their answer. If that second utterance was the second person, it's them agreeing on an answer to the quiz. So it matters who said what. People will address each other instead of addressing just the agent. I might, yesterday we were at the pub, and we, ask a question to the group to see, has anyone been here before? So you don't just address an individual, you address multiple people, and these are just problems that are not currently seen in today's system. So if I'm having a one-to-one interaction with you and you speak, I know you're speaking to me, and then I speak to you, and we'd have none of these. Yeah, exactly. And none of these sort of two people having a side conversation and then someone coming back and referring back to something that was earlier. So that's how I sort of. It's a huge open question. A few weeks ago, there was a special session we ran at a conference on multi-party dialogues, and there was lots of interest from researchers because there's so many open questions. It's really difficult. So.
Thank you. Okay, I think we've covered a fair bit of what it will look like within the remit of what we've seen in the conference as well. So if we go on to the challenges, maybe if we could start with a few of the current challenges and some of the future ones as well. Michael, do you want to look at what about human failure? Where does, that's the number one thing that we have concerns about, and how is that going to fare over the next few years?
One of the problems, of course, that people have been talking about is the way in which people don't accept the system, really. They're not very happy with working with the system. We have this in some of our projects. I think it's going to be important, and this is actually where the conversation design, I think, comes in. That's been another major theme of our meeting so far. Maria, who's at the front here, gave an excellent talk this morning about the need for conversational design. It's very easy just to get swept away by the technology and forget the people that are going to be using the technology. On the other hand, sometimes the people have very high expectations of what it might do that you can't actually meet. And so you need somebody to mediate between the actual users of the system and the stakeholders involved and what the technology can actually do. So I think that's going to be a very important aspect, really. We can't just be swept away by the grand technologies that we're being offered. We need to then be able to use them in a sensible way, in an ethical way as well, also very important. And it's good to see that there's a lot of effort being directed towards that in current work, and we're hearing a lot about that right here.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to expand that with you, Angus, a little bit more. As a developer, I'm going to take it in that direction. What about data collection? What's the state of affairs when it comes to data collection? And then obviously with that, it links with some sort of ethical centric problem.
I agree. So currently working on 2 data collections. One is with people with dementia in their own homes with a voice assistant. In this case, it's Alexa. And the other one is this robot in the hospital. So I think in 2 weeks we have the robot doing tests with patients. And ethical approval for this is obviously very, very difficult. There's whole consent problems in when people have cognitive impairments, for example. But recently I gathered about, I think it was 40 to 50 PhD students from internationally came to Edinburgh, and this happens sort of yearly, not just Edinburgh, but we have yearly meetings where for 2 days PhD students sort of discuss the challenges that they're working on. And I recently wrote a sort of article on what challenges there were, and a lot of them sort of, 5 years ago, people were working on customer service, maybe in automobiles, because that's who's funding this research. But now it's a lot broader. It's psychotherapy bots for people for mental health conditions, training children who maybe have or autism and need to train them on social skills. I believe that was one of the students' projects. And robots, underwater vehicles, asking them what they're up to when they're autonomous. There's this sort of a huge range of domains now that wasn't really the case even a few years ago, at least in the discussions. And that causes huge problems where you need to have interdisciplinary teams. You need to be able to collaborate with people who are non-domain experts. That's vital, and you need the data, and this data doesn't tend to exist. That's just why we have to do these data collections, which take a very long time to get ethical approval, because you need to get the ethics correct. You need to sort of be able to show that you're benefiting the user, and this data, if used incorrectly, could be used for nefarious purposes. I don't know if it fully answered your question.
So now we, earlier on this morning, Heide was talking about responsible AI, trustworthy AI. So the EU Act hasn't quite gone into force yet. Heide, correct me if I'm wrong. So where do you, in connection with the problems that we've just discussed, how do you think that would look like in about 10 years' time? I might put you on the spot there, but it must be coming out very soon. Yeah. How do you think that's going to look like? What will be able? Will there be? Will data privacy be such a so prominent? Will something else come along, or is it the cause which will take precedence over the data privacy?
It's a great question. I don't have the answer because it's a huge big problem and no one has the answer. But I actually really loved your talk this morning. And I would say that one huge discussion we had on this topic this summer was when we're collecting data and annotating data, the institutions and ethical approval processes want you to keep it as anonymous as possible. Whereas you need demographic data, not just for the people that you're collecting data from, but who annotated that data. There was a student from India who did a data collection and said that he could tell when annotators were from India or from the UK based upon their annotation. I can't exactly remember the topic, but he didn't have that data because he wasn't allowed to collect that data. So there definitely needs to be some room for being able to open up and get this data, not just the data itself, but this sort of metadata in order to sort of be more transparent in the models.
So I'm currently I'm currently looking at this case of anonymized and unlinked data, and then looking at pseudo-anonymized and linked data. Now that scope, those three sort of areas, Heide, I'm just looking towards you, have been around for a while now, but they're becoming such a question at this moment in time when we are trying to embark on any sort of, any sort of, I would say, in our case, we're talking about AI, but any sort of product that has human participants. So this question about can we really invest in a project where this space is so complicated, the legislations have got to help us to really tackle some of these areas which are, which we can't really get to. So I'm looking at the early detection of cognitive decline, but I can only do that with cognitively healthy individuals, first of all, because there's a sense of safeness there, yeah? But then it does take you into another realm of difficulty and sensitive nature as well. So I would like to see, that was something, just to add to what your point was, that has got to, the goalpost has got to change somewhere. And over to you, Lottie. Slightly different change of topic now. Back to, from your management and communications sort of work. Where would the right to meaningful context fit over the next few years?
Yeah, so when I've been asked about the ethical considerations in relation to digital humans, I would say that it's important to think about the right of meaningful contact. In the Netherlands, we have an institution who's really making a pledge that when you're having a conversation with a conversational agent, you should always have the right to speak to a real human being. Mm-hmm. And this is particularly important in case of digital humans, because sometimes we are not able to tell the difference anymore. But then it's not a black and white discussion, it comes with all kinds of shades of gray, because what is meaningful contact? I've been working with companies, like in healthcare, for example, who are saying, well, we have really problem to help a particular target group because they feel ashamed for their problems. You can think about sexual health problems or drug abuse, and that really throws a barrier to get help, because you have to talk with another person who might judge you about the problems that you're having. And here, digital humans can provide that meaningful contact, because a digital human is not going to judge. It has no beliefs, for example. And therefore, research shows that they can be really helpful to help these kinds of people to get over their shame as a first step into getting real help from real human beings. So this right for of meaningful contact is a really complicated discussion, but I think it's important to talk about it when talking about the narrative of ethical AI, because this is something that we often forget. So, and besides the right of meaningful contact, I think in relation to digital humans, there are two more human values that are important to protect, and that is first also transparency. I was really happy with your presentation this morning, Hilde, that you were saying transparency is also about communicating that you're not dealing with a real human being, that you're dealing with an AI agent. And of course you can use disclosures, informing people this is not a real person, but then still in our own research we show that this can still have adverse effects. For example, if digital humans are used for sales, normally what would happen, okay, this agent is going to persuade me, and then persuasion knowledge is triggered. That is basically a mechanism, psychological mechanism, to protect yourself against persuasion, which is closely tied to the intention. This person has the intention to persuade me. But if we're dealing with a digital human, persuasion knowledge is not triggered because we're not dealing with an agent with intentions. So the result is that we're, in the end, persuaded more strongly by a digital agent than a human agent. So this raises all kinds of new questions on how to deal with it. And then a third one is also diversity. If we really want to seize the potential of digital humans, we need to make sure that people are likely to recognize themselves in these digital humans. And when I look at the market, digital humans are now mostly designed to be white females, and also with an obedient personality. And I think this is going to amplify existing stereotypes that are already here in society. And I think we should be really careful when designing these kinds of digital humans, to be aware of that.
Thank you. So, Micah, do we have any questions? Do we have any questions from the audience? Because we can for online?
We
please?
do. There's a very lively debate, kind of like a back channel debate going on online, and thank you so much for asking, because
Yeah.
I thought, should I kind of interrupt?
Yeah.
It's basically Nena and Nathan and me kind of, we were wondering what happens if one synthesia talks to another one. Will that conversation have actually happened? And of course, this was very much a philosophical question up till now, but it's becoming a reality. So we're creating possibly a whole digital shadow world in which things may happen on our behalf without us being aware of them. And we were just kind of, this is kind of also closely tied to human likeness being disorienting, and that's very much touching on what you just shared as well, like of all the shapes that we can choose for an AI, why do we choose to create it to our own likeness? And then we kind of spun off on a sidetrack, like what would an accurate representation look like? That they just don't know. And that's basically where it stopped for us. So we have a lot of questions and no answers at all, but it's definitely,
Okay.
One more point.
Yeah.
Nena referred to a paper I am definitely going to read, that otherwhere needs otherness. So rather than making it more human, we might deliberately design for otherness, for otherwhere. And I thought that was an absolutely interesting point. Yeah. So yeah, to be continued. Have I got everything now? Yeah, that's probably it, I think. Nena, please feel free to add if I forgot anything.
So just behind you, we have a question. Yep.
What do you think about the impact of vision and multimodal inputs? A lot of these new language models that are about to come down are not just text, it's not just language. And how is that going to affect the design of these systems in the coming years?
Okay, I can start and then we can follow that. So I'm looking at some of the work that I'm doing. I'm looking at multimodality as well. I think it was a question that was posed in the earlier talk about a sort of like speech dysfunction, speech disfluencies. I think we have to make sure that we know what we need to know exactly what realm of that we are going to work with, and if we are going to have users that are outside of that realm, we need to clearly make that. Clearly make users aware of that. So it's all about what is the persona of your users, and you work with that to build what you have. I think it will be the case. It will be very tragic to claim that you are working with voice where you are not considering, your full possible speech ability. So I think there'll be a lot more work on this. The work that I'm currently doing, I'm looking at those speech disfluencies and looking at creating a bespoke annotator that will consider those disfluencies in terms of as part of those natural language processing pipelines, obviously automatic speech recognition to text. So considering them and considering the nature of the users and what you are going to do with that is so critical. But I do feel that we are at a point where a couple of things may unfold out of this over the next few years. Over to you, Angus. So, yeah.
Sure. I'll try and be quick.
Yeah.
So I worked on a couple of projects with people with visual impairments, and I think, my answer is similar to maybe current ChatGPT, which is, it's great, it's very useful for lots of use cases, but in particular domains like healthcare, the controllability is just not there. So, for example, I think Verena Reiser and one of her PhD students found an example where a system mistook seasoning for medication. No, sorry, it was a bottle of medication, and it replied with, "Oh, this is seasoning." The current systems that we built were very, very almost completely rule-based, aside from sort of the outputs of the models, because we just could not respond to a user saying this is seasoning and then have someone pour medication all over their food. So, I guess that's my answer. Is I see them to be, they're going to be very useful, but I imagine that's going to be a huge problem, that sort of, that kind of domain.
Monty.
Yeah, I was wondering, because Mike also posed a couple of questions from the audience, the online audience, whether it's also nice to answer these questions.
Yes, certainly.
Yeah? Yeah, one of the questions was, why are we so focused on developing digital humans in a human shape? I think we do not necessarily have to. That's important to stress. We are obsessed to making them as photorealistic as possible, but we should really think about under what circumstances this is going to resonate with our audience. For example, people with autism spectrum, for example, they find it difficult to communicate with people because they have to translate nonverbal communication, right? And this is becoming even more difficult if it's digitalized. So what we know from research is that it's going to help them more if we would design digital humans in the shape of a robot, for example, or a cartoon or something like that. But what is difficult right now is that many of the software is, they have a collection of digital humans only in a human shape. So whenever we are going to start the process of, okay, do I want to implement a digital human, it's really important to think, okay, does this need to have a human shape or not? And if not, we might want to design one ourselves. So that was one question. And the other question was about the whole shady life of different digital humans communicating with each other.
Well, to kind of briefly elaborate on this answer, which I think is wonderful. If you look at current conversation design practices, there's some really great guidelines out there. For instance, Rebecca Evanhoe, she created this great matrix of the more transactional your bot is, the less personified you need to make it, and the more kind of social interactive it is, the more there is like a need or an expectation of a more personified or anthropomorphized, perhaps, shape, especially when it's embodied AI. But I think that ChatGPT and all these large language models, they're kind of uprooting all our current design practices, because basically the conversation itself is so natural already that my natural tendency would be to tone it down like completely, just to make sure that people don't fall into that kind of almost gullibility trap, if you will, because it's so persuasive.
Yeah, and that brings us back to transparency again. And we have this, we are wired to look through this human lens already. We are already anthropomizing the world. So we often only need 2 dots and a stripe in the configuration of a face to trigger anthropomorphism. But then still, to resonate on a human level, these emotions are important as well. So that's why I'm saying under what circumstances do you need them to be photorealistic, and that is something we need more research upon.
Well, that's a good thing to hear then, because that means that probably people like us won't be out of a job anytime soon, because this is conscious design, right? It's not something that just happens to us.
Yeah.
So thank you for that.
So
in relation to where 2 digital entities interact with each other, there'll be a few competitions where they've been set up to see which one was better. So one example was Cookie, used to be called Mitsuku. That was developed by Steve Warswick of PandoraBots. And it was pitted against BlenderBot of Facebook. There was a digital entity created to represent BlenderBot. And they chatted, I think, for almost 2 weeks with each other as sort of a competition. And then observers then had to rate which one they thought was better. And it turned out that Cookie was the better one in people's judgments. And the interesting thing there was that Cookie is based on the old-fashioned technology of basic rules and pattern matching, whereas BlenderBot would have been based on the more modern technologies with large language models and so on. So that was a sort of interesting finding. On the other hand, developing something like Cookie has taken 18 years, so it's not something maybe anybody can do in a short time. On the other question about what they would look like, we have a project, it's an EU-Japan project, and the interaction will be ultimately with social robots of various shapes and sizes provided by different providers. And we did have a questionnaire with users, and generally they didn't really want to have these little things that looked like dogs or whatever. They wanted to have more human-like robots, but not too human-like. So there was the sort of uncanny valley sort of thing. But they wanted something that was a bit more sort of human-like. And then just on the question that we had from the audience here, we're working in that project with emotion detection, which I think is becoming very important now, and also visual detection of emotion. So by monitoring facial expressions, it's a company in Germany that's doing that work, and we have to then integrate that with the other dialogue system that we're developing to make use of that. So again, I think that's quite interesting work.
Can I extend that further? So social robots you've just been talking about. Can we look at it from more of an ecosystem architectural perspective? How do you think, how interoperable will it be? You know, how would the main prominent players, how would that play out when it comes to creating these robots, well, these social robots or conversational agents, which have got several sort of multi-channel, omni-channel, so many third-party vendors. How's that going to pan out? Any ideas?
Yeah. Some of the things I've been doing with the Open Voice Network, they work on various things, but one of them is interoperability. And there's the big question, do you want to have one sort of overall assistant that does everything and then delegates to others if it can't handle like train bookings or whatever? Or do you have all these different ones so that you have about 20 different assistants on your system, and then you have to sort of go and find which one you want? And that's a big question. And people, some companies seem to think that they wanted to have the one that was under their control totally and it did everything. And then other people wanted to have different ones. So it's a bit of an open question, really. But the whole idea of interoperability, that you can actually have things delegated to other agents, that without you, the user, actually knowing about it, that these sort of interactions are taking place in between the different agents. I think that's a very interesting thing. And they're developing a white paper on that right now, actually.
Thank you. So Angus, I'm going to take that a little bit further now. Yeah, we've got back to the user now. What about accessibility? What's that going to look like?
Well, I know that we have very little time, so I'll be fast.
Yes, yeah, we're just going to,
I think there's... So I recently wrote a paper called Voice Assistant Accessibility, and it was a short paper, just a position paper, looking at lots of different groups, different mental health conditions, multiple sclerosis, for example. And yes, some of these groups, such as people with depression, for example, there must be a lot of data. There's a lot of research in that area. But in others, so for example, I looked up sort of research on voice assistants for people with Tourette's.
Yes.
And I couldn't find anything. I just couldn't find anything at all. So I'd just like to think that, voice assistant accessibility, at least in the research side, sort of picks up. And then, I think there's a lot of sort of use cases in business where you're making accessibility on that end. And hopefully voice assistants are useful for everyone because they can really change people's lives, especially if they have maybe movement problems or something.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. I think we've covered a lot of topics here. I think we've just sort of run out of time. Thank you all for listening, and I hope we've given a little bit of flavour of what we think it's going to look like in 20 to 30 years' time. Thank you.
We shouldn't stop this, right? I know we should stop this now for the break, but I just want to extend an open invitation to whoever is willing and interested to collaborate on doing like a monthly think tank, either in person or online, at a university or a polytechnic, where we do these kind of sessions, where we come together with a mixed audience. We bring our questions and we just do this for like a 2-hour session, because this is just too good to stop right here and having to wait for next year. thank you so much.
Thank you.
Coffee break. I'm sure that lots of people will go and try to find you, so make sure that you've got your throats kind of in order for that. Half an hour coffee break, and then we're kind of already coming to a close. So enjoy your each other's company and see you back in
the
half
dry
an hour.
air in the plane.